But these are nonetheless the consequences if her stated views on the law prevail in the Supreme Court, and if Republicans are successful in filling this vacancy prior to November 10th. Well, then we know these views will almost certainly prevail. So that's what's at stake here. That's what weighs heavily on me as we begin these hearings. It also weighs heavily on the minds of the Vermonters I represent. I've heard from them often and loudly since Justice Ginsburg's passing. They're scared, Judge Barrett. They're scared that your confirmation would rip from them the very health care protections the millions of Americans have fought to maintain and which Congress has repeatedly rejected eliminating. They're scared that the clock will be turned back to a time when women had no right to control their own bodies and when it was acceptable to discriminate against women in the workplace.
Some of it is to tell Patrick Leahy that he's, maybe it's time to do some oil painting in the backyard with the grandkids.
Do these guys ever stop? You know how we have an age requirement for certain offices, right? You have to be a certain age to be president. You have to be a certain age to be in the United States Senate, and a certain age for the House. You know how we have that? I think we also are at a point now where we need to consider an upper limit for elected office, because people's egos are overtaking their ability to think fairly and rationally about whether they are, in fact, the most energetic, the most mentally acute, and best representative for the people in their place. Because they just, look, people want to be important. You see this in the media all the time. You see people get addicted to being important and having other people listen to them and having power. And just being a normal person is terrifying to folks who have been in that role, been a senator for 40 years. Look at Joe Biden. Right? Look at Leahy and look at Nancy Pelosi. You know, I'm telling you honestly, I mean, I think Trump is age-wise at the upper limit of what somebody should be to be the president. And Trump is also somebody who has a tremendous amount of energy and vitality for his age and is in very good health. In fact, since we're speaking about the president's health, he said that, here we are, folks. It's Monday. I said we got to wait till Monday to know for sure. The media is not going to focus on this. I'm just take a little break from the judge stuff for a second here. Trump's saying he's great, good to go, back in action. 74-year-old, or maybe 3, but 70-plus-year-old Donald Trump, with some concern over some additional aggravating factors, got COVID, beat it in 3-4 days. He's telling you himself. He said he's fine, doesn't even have it anymore. Play 14.
The note that you have revealed from your doctor, which says you are no longer considered a transmission risk, does this suggest you no longer have COVID, sir?
Yes, and not only that, it seems like I'm immune, so I can go way out of a basement, which I would have done anyway, and which I did, because you have to run a country. You have to get out of the basement, and it looks like I'm immune for, I don't know, maybe a long time, or maybe a short time. It could be a lifetime. Nobody really knows, but I'm immune. So the president is in very good shape.
Here we are, folks. A moment of celebration that the media will just ignore. President's fine. It wasn't just a stunt. It wasn't just, he wanted that shot outside the White House after he'd been released from Walter Reed, where he took off his mask, and they were all saying, he's Mussolini, because they're psychos, because they're crazy. No, the president beat this thing. And now really you see the two narratives. You can be Joe Biden. You can be I got to wear the mask all the time, and I got to be, hey, man, I'm a mask maniac. And you can avoid people and stay in your basement. And look, I have never said that anyone shouldn't, that's freedom. You want to stay in your basement? You want to not live your life? Fine. But Trump now shows us that, no, you should be able to make the decision to live your life, knowing that there is some risk that you could get COVID-19. And yes, knowing that means you could, in fact, transmit the disease to other people as well, not intentionally, but this is the world we live in. Viruses are in the air. Viruses are all over us, actually, all the time. People don't ever talk about that, but it's true. It's really just a question of your immune system. There's a constant ongoing battle between your immune system and microbes, but we don't think about that very much. But the president beat it And there's a study out of Harvard just today that says that looks like at least 4 months, they think, according to this study out of Harvard, Harvard Medical School, will give you protection. So that means Trump is fine. Trump can go out there and he can shake hands and high five and kiss babies and all. He's good. Based on what we know about epidemiology, based upon what we know of the virus, no reason to believe otherwise. Certainly up until the election and probably deep into 2021. So who made the better decision, really? Remember, they were all jumping on the president and saying, look at how reckless he is. He got it. Yeah. And they were saying he deserved it. And they were saying they hoped he had a bad outcome. And the president responded with, look, I'm the president. I got to be out there. I got to do things. I've got to represent my people. And that means that there's going to be some risk. There is risk to the president every time he goes to any event. That's why he's got the Secret Service with him, right? This is not a risk-free job. As a number of U.S. presidents from our past, unfortunately, can't attest to, but if you look at the history books, and as recently as Ronald Reagan, it was very apparent to presidents that there are risks with that job. It is not risk-free. There are risks from bad people. There are risks from bad diseases. That's just the reality. And now we have a president who has recovered from the virus and is fine and is a symbol to so many other folks. If 74-year-old Donald Trump, now look, I understand he got very good care, but they used drugs on him that they use on other people as well. But Donald Trump, yes, he got in there early because he was being tested frequently. But, first of all, 40% of people, they tell us, are asymptomatic entirely. So even if you get this, the chances are that, or there's a good chance, I should say, that you will have no symptoms. And the chances are very high that you'll have very minimal symptoms. And who is even paying attention to the fact that the World Health Organization, one of its top officials over the weekend, now look, I know we were bashing the WHO because it was way too China-friendly with this Wuhan coronavirus stuff in the beginning, fine. But they do look at this issue, and we were told that we should listen to them and that it was only just some kind of a Trump conspiracy to even question the WHO. WHO officials come out and said, look, we should not have lockdowns as the go-to policy. Just said it. Just like, look, we should not do this. This does not make sense. It's too damaging. It's too costly to society. Stop using lockdowns as the primary move here. But, look, there's a reason, friends, that the long lockdowns we're seeing were never considered the wise response to a pandemic in all the policy and academic literature written on this, and there was a lot of it before 2020. Actually, until April of this year. The media and our expert class have failed us. They're never going to admit their catastrophic errors. But that's what has happened here. That's the truth of our fight against COVID-19. Lockdowns did not work and exacted a terrible toll on society, one that we can't even really begin to calculate. A tremendous amount of duress and stress put on people all across the country. And if you look at the country-by-country breakdown, you know what? One of the single biggest differentiators here between countries with really bad outcomes and countries that were pretty okay with this has to do with the percentage of the population that had serious health problems before COVID-19. That's just the facts. This is just data and numbers. You look at South Korea, you look at Japan, they have far less diabetes and far less obesity than we do. And so when you add that to the way that we calculate COVID deaths, where there are now clear examples, right? Bright red line kind of examples of someone who dies from an accident or self-harm, but they test and the person has COVID-19. They say it's a COVID death. I mean, and there are incentives in the system for doctors because you get federal money for the hospital. There are incentives for coding it as a COVID death. And no one's going to challenge you or be upset at you for saying it's a COVID death. In the sort of consensus media Democrat world, they're going to say, see, this is a person who's taking the disease seriously. That's what they'll say. It's pretty stunning. We continue to see this. Pretty stunning indeed. Look, recently I got a crash course into home title theft. You better pray this crime never happens to you because, honestly, it can ruin you financially, and it goes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's what happens. The legal titles to our home are digitized. They are online, they're kept in servers, and in the cloud. A cyber thief hacks these to find your home's title, forges your signature on a quitclaim deed stating you sold your home to them. Then loans are taken out against your home till all your equity is gone and you're left with the debt. You don't know about this until the collection calls start. Insurance and common identity theft programs won't protect you. You need Home Title Lock to create a virtual barrier around your home's title. The instant Home Title Lock detects tampering, they will work to shut it down right away. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim of this crime and don't even know it. Then use code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's code RADIO at HomeTitleLock.com. Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com, code RADIO.
And so we are now beginning the fastest economic recovery in history. We created a record 11.4 million jobs just in the last 4 months. That's the fastest ever. The U.S. has seen the smallest economic contraction of any major nation anywhere in the world. So we've seen the smallest going down. If you look at it, that's an incredible statement. Our opponents will crush the comeback with unscientific lockdowns. They want to lock everything down. Here we go again. They want to lock it down. No. We're not going to let it happen. We're not going to let it happen. So important you get out and vote. You got to get out and vote.
Not going to be a second lockdown. Music to my ears, at least at the federal level, especially as I have to sit here and worry about what they're going to do in New York, where I believe we are going to go into an extended lockdown again, in New York City at least, where I'm currently doing the show. I remember when I spoke to the president in May, and I was in the Oval Office with him, spent 45 minutes or so, close to an hour, I think, sitting there just talking about everything, just the two of us, nobody else in the room. And the one thing that I really wanted to hammer home, and he completely agreed with me, to his credit, he completely agreed with me on this. I just said, sir, we can't do a second lockdown. This is madness. And he said, Buck, there's not going to be a second lockdown. We're going to put out the fires as they come up, but there's not going to be a second lockdown. It was, that was a one-time thing to get us prepared because we were caught off guard by this. We didn't have the PPE and the ventilators and all these things that everyone said that they were going to need so badly. So far, the president has kept his promise on that one. And I asked him, I said, promise me you're not going to do that, sir. And he said, we're not going to do that. So that's a promise so far that has been kept, and I'm happy that the president understands why that would be such a bad idea. But I'm also deeply concerned because with Democrats, this is now an article of faith. They're going to want to have a lockdown and then have Biden bring us out of it in his own good time. Federal mask mandate, he's saying this. And I keep asking people, if we're going to have a federal mask mandate, why not have a federal mask and goggles mandate? I mean, why not really go all in, right? Why not? We could make enough goggles for everybody. Shouldn't we all have to wear goggles and a mask? And then shouldn't we just do a full hooded ventilator system so that you really are actually getting protect? That works, brother. That would protect you from the virus. But why? Too expensive? Too much? I thought this was about saving lives. Notice how the way that they argue with people like me who will say masks probably have some effect. I don't know how big it is. I don't deny that it is helpful in some circumstances in some ways, but it's minimal. It's insufficient. It's not enough to stop this thing, obviously. It wasn't enough to stop the Spanish influenza pandemic of 1918 when they had mask policies in cities, by the way, and people were dying in numbers where, trust me, nobody was like saying, I'm just going to go out there. I shouldn't say nobody. There's always people. But, people were wearing masks, folks. And I'm sure the people that stopped wearing them in 1918 were the ones who said, this isn't saving us. So what are we even doing? But anyway, I just note that the Biden campaign has made this a huge virtue signal, which we all know, which is why I don't think I've seen a photo of Joe Biden out without a mask on. I don't even know in how many months, other than at the debate, obviously. Who knows if there's even going to be a second debate. But I'll tell you this, I rode on an Amtrak train yesterday, and I just have to kind of laugh. Here's a little window into the future of what you get if you allow Democrat statist types to determine how we're going to respond to this pandemic for the future. This is what your life is going to be like, not just for all of next year, maybe deep into 2022. You're going to have policies like I sat there on Amtrak dealing with this, where you have no one's allowed to sit next to you. Now, I think maybe if you're of the same household, but who even knows with that? You'll see these experts that'll write, hey, when you're having, special fun time with your significant other, well, you got to make sure you wear that surgical mask to protect them from COVID. That's a real thing. I know some of you are giggling. That's a real thing. Got to wear the mask for special fun time. Okay. That's the craziest thing, I think. I mean, how much... And then take the mask off while you sleep next to each other in the same room, in the same bed for the rest of the night, right? But, husband and wife, doesn't matter, got to protect each other. It's absurd. It's stupid. We all know it's stupid. But I just point out all the stupid policies, and people get mad at me. And I say, well, are we just supposed to all do dumb things? Because some people are scared. And so they get to make all the decisions for all the rest of us? You could go swimming in the ocean and get eaten by a shark tomorrow. It can happen. In fact, I think the most common places in the country for shark, I think the most common place in the world for shark attack might even be on the coast of Florida. I think it's right up there. It's the coast of Florida, east coast of Australia, and off South Africa. That's where you have certainly the most shark attacks in total. I think the most fatal shark attacks too. Now, why am I talking about shark attacks? Because if I ran around telling everybody who was going into the ocean, what are you doing? You could be eaten by a shark. Technically true, but I think people should be allowed to swim. Now, I understand there are far more people getting COVID shark attacks, but I'm just saying that when it comes to day-to-day risk mitigation in our own lives, people should be allowed to make their own decisions. And for people who say things like, oh, but what about seatbelt laws, Buck? I'd say, yeah, plenty of people don't wear their seatbelts. I got news for you. Plenty of people still don't do it. Still don't do it. And also, the fine for not wearing a seatbelt isn't $1,500 or prison time. It's like $50. Who cares? And, that's also just affecting you. That's not affecting anybody else. And it's such a minor inconvenience that even I think some libertarians say, all right, whatever. Wearing a mask is not a minor inconvenience. It's really annoying. It's oppressive. It's psychologically deleterious. I believe that. I'm going to go to the gym today. I'm going to be doing deadlifts with a frickin' mask on like an idiot. Alone, because no one else will even go to the gym because they're so scared where I am. Alone in, a room that's probably 1,500 square feet with the windows open. But got to wear that mask while I'm deadlifting. It's insane, right? But so anyway, back to the Amtrak. So I'm on the Amtrak where, blue collar Joe takes it. You know how long the Amtrak Acela is from Delaware to D.C. to Capitol Hill? It's actually like the greatest commute imaginable in a lot of ways. 45 minutes. I don't know, maybe it's 45 minutes to Baltimore. But anyway, it's like an hour. It's quick. And that's what Joe Biden was doing, once or twice a week or something, too. It wasn't even like that often. It's crazy. But I'm on the Acela. They won't let somebody sit next to you, but you have people mandated, because it's assigned seating now, sit in front of you and behind you. And I was sitting across from somebody, and I kid you not, she had a little mask on, and she pulled the classic Biden maneuver. Remember when Biden pulled down his mask to cough into his hand and then pulled his mask back up again? She had a coughing fit, coughing right next to me. Pulled her mask off for the coughing fit. So just like, based on what we're all told, just like virus everywhere, right? All kinds of whatever she's got, just coughing all over the place. And then pulled her mask back up. And I'm sitting here like, oh, gee, thanks. So I get the coughing, which is actually expelling the virus, 15 feet or whatever it is. But the mask wearing, when you're breathing, it's so dumb, folks. And then I sit around people who are, eating a bagel with cream cheese, no mask on for, 30 or 40 minutes. But for the last 20 minutes of the trip, they put that mask back on because that's going to protect us. It's idiocy. It's idiocy. It makes no sense. Don't listen to the lockdown libs who judge you and mask shame you. It is Columbus Day. It is not Indigenous Peoples Day. It is Columbus Day, named for Christopher Columbus, the Italian explorer who, on behalf of the Spanish crown, discovered the New World, changed global history, and is somebody who, for this accomplishment, we celebrate him. right? We don't celebrate him because he was a nice guy, because he was just a big old cuddle bear. We celebrate Christopher Columbus because he's somebody who changed the course of history and brought about a change in the historical trajectory that resulted in a system, the American system, that then spread around the world, that has resulted in more people living longer, healthier, better lives, more people pulled out of poverty in the 20th century into the 21st century alone than at any other time in human history, and probably all of the rest of human history added together. I know that sounds mind-boggling, but it's true. Here's a proclamation on Columbus Day from the White House. More than 500 years ago, Christopher Columbus's intrepid voyage to the New World ushered in a new era of exploration and discovery. His travels led to European contact with the Americas, and a century later, the first settlements on the shores of the modern-day United States. Today, we celebrate Columbus Day to commemorate the great Italian who opened a new chapter in world history and to appreciate his enduring significance to the Western Hemisphere. When Christopher Columbus and his crew sailed across the Atlantic Ocean on the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, it marked the beginning of a new era in human history. For Italian Americans, Christopher Columbus represents one of the first of many immeasurable contributions of Italy to American history. As a native of Genoa, Columbus inspired early immigrants to carry forth their rich Italian heritage to the New World. Today, the United States benefits from the warmth and generosity of nearly 17 million Italian Americans whose love of family and country strengthen the fabric of our nation. For our beautiful Italian American communities and Americans of every background, Columbus remains a legendary figure. Sadly, in recent years, radical activists have sought to undermine Christopher Columbus's legacy. These extremists seek to replace discussion of his vast contributions with talk of failings, with discoveries of atrocities, and his achievements with transgressions. Rather than learn from our history, this radical ideology and its adherents seek to revise it, deprive it of any splendor, and mark it as inherently sinister. They seek to squash any dissent from their orthodoxy. We must not give in to these tactics or consent to such a bleak view of our history. We must teach future generations about our storied heritage, starting with the protection of monuments to our intrepid heroes like Columbus. This June, I signed an executive order to ensure that any person or group destroying or vandalizing a federal monument, memorial, or statue is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I've also taken steps to ensure that we preserve our nation's history and promote patriotic education. On this Columbus Day, we embrace the same optimism that led Christopher Columbus to discover the New World. We inherit that optimism along with the legacy of American heroes who blazed the trails, settled the continent, tamed the wilderness, and built the single greatest nation the world has ever seen. In commemoration of Christopher Columbus's historic voyage, the Congress, by joint resolution of April 30th, 1934, requested the President proclaim the second Monday of October each year as Columbus Day. Now, therefore, I, Donald Trump, President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim October 12th, 2020 as Columbus Day. I call upon the people of the United States to observe this day with appropriate ceremonies and activities. I direct that the flag of the United States be displayed on all public buildings on the appointed day in honor of our diverse history and all who have contributed to shaping this nation. In witness hereof, I have hereunto set my hand this 9th day of October in the year of our Lord 2020, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 245th. Donald Trump. That's just one thing that if Joe Biden becomes your president, you can kiss all that kind of stuff goodbye. Joe Biden will be showing up talking about Indigenous Peoples Day. You know, it's fascinating, isn't it? For BLM, Democrats wore kente cloth scarves. Remember that? I mean, it was Nancy Pelosi, kente cloth scarf, right? What? Such a shameless pandering, such demagoguery. And among many others, Chuck Schumer. Yeah, because they're really all about African history. I mean, but Joe Biden, might show up on Indigenous Peoples Day. What? I mean, I don't know. Was he going to wear a feathered headdress or something, or is that no? That's not allowed. Kente cloth is allowed, but Native American garb or anything like that not allowed. Seems to who knows where the rules are? Different for the left than on the right. That's for sure. But all of this talk of American optimism and the brilliance of Columbus and what he did, that will all be entirely forgotten. And there's another part of this history that's forgotten as well, and that's Columbus as a point of pride. And one would think if they really looked back, and I think if more people knew this history, particularly if Democrats, by the way, don't know history, they know little snippets of history that are useful for the socialist left narrative of control today, but they don't actually know history. As just a broad thing, they generally have no idea what the heck they're talking about. And I mean the ones that are making these arguments. I mean the 1619 Project, which now people are calling for it to be stripped of its Pulitzer, which will never happen, even though it's changed its mission statement. That's how fraudulent that whole thing was. They've said it was about establishing a new day for the American founding, and now they're saying, no, it's not about that. We've scrubbed that. Not true. Oh, interesting. But people forget the struggles. You know, there have been waves of immigration into this country in the past and the struggles that different immigrant groups had, notably Italian Americans who did face real discrimination. And I know people hear this now and they think, come on, Italian, we got, Cuomo is the governor of New York and, Rudy Giuliani was America's most famous mayor. And you think of all these Italian Americans who have big political names and have become so well known. But if you go back into history a little bit, there were some very ugly incidents of bigotry against Italian immigrants in this country. And Columbus Day was a thing that they derived tremendous pride in because the Italian Americans were generally doing menial jobs when they got here, didn't speak the language, and especially for those who are more Sicilian and from further south and more central in the Mediterranean Sea, they were known to be usually a little bit darker. And so there was a racial component that would come out to the anti-Italian rhetoric of the time. And I know now it's like talking about anti-Irish bigotry. Irish were banned from or barred from jobs. Irish need not apply. Irish weren't allowed to work. Irish were thought of as criminals. Irish were thought of as thugs, thieves, untrustworthy. Now, then the Irish became, they went from being the, quote, thieves to then becoming the cops in pretty much every major American city and then running, the political machinery. And now, they're all over the place, right? And I'm basically half Irish by heritage, roughly 50% Irish. And of that stock, my ancestors came over on one side during the potato famine in 1840 and settled in Brooklyn, New York. Just got right off the dock, and this is where they were, and that's why I've got very long roots here in New York City. But the Italians, there's one incident that comes to mind. I mean, there were 11 Italian Americans who were lynched. Also, another thing, lynching was a terrible crime that was done mostly, but not exclusively, against African Americans from around 1870, getting into about Reconstruction era into the 1920s or so. You had a few thousand people in the United States who were lynched, and about 2 out of 3 were African American. But there was about a third of the lynchings that occurred were not the horrible crimes perpetrated against African Americans. There were terrible crimes against other people, including whites who were trying to push for black rights in the South. There were a whole number of them who were lynched. And immigrants. Different immigrants were lynched. In 1891, I don't even know how many of you would know this story. New Orleans, one of my favorite cities in America. I love New Orleans. It's such a fun place, and it's such a cool mix of different cultures. But it wasn't always a happy place with regard to how those cultures interacted with each other. That's putting it mildly. I mean, depending on the time in history, you can obviously point to a whole lot of problems there. But there was an assassination, effectively, of, I believe it was the police chief. It might have been the mayor of New Orleans. I have to go check. I think it was the police chief, and he was killed. And they believed that it was the Italian-American population. This was 1891 in New Orleans. They thought it was the Italian-American population. There already was this sense of mafia ties and criminal activity with the Italians. And they had already had a number of people tried and acquitted. And they were still being held in the jail for some reason, and others were still awaiting trial. And a mob formed, broke in, and murdered, hanged, and mutilated So they shot them, and then some of them they hang, and they ripped apart the bodies. They took body parts as trophies. 11 Italian Americans killed in 1891 in New Orleans. Maybe one person, and I would be willing to bet a whole lot of money it wasn't one of the 11, for what one person did to an official of the city of New Orleans. 11 lynchings all at once. So there was a dark history here of discrimination against immigrant groups, including Italian Americans. And Christopher Columbus is part of the pride, and that's why they'll talk about the pride the Italian American community feels with, hey, we were early contributors to this American project, right? It was an Italian who even discovered this place. Right? It's an Italian, Amerigo Vespucci, for whom this country is named. And so that's all part of, it's interesting. The left sees this need for other groups to have heroes elevated, and they're right in many cases about the heroes that they're choosing, right? They're right to want to elevate, people from the Latino and the African American community who have contributed to this country throughout its history in ways. Absolutely, and I'm all for that, right? I mean, I think that you could argue that Frederick Douglass is one of the true founding fathers in many ways in this country, but with Italian Americans, it's considered it's all a sacrifice to wokeness now. And that's why not far from where I'm doing the show is the large statue of Christopher Columbus in Columbus Circle named for him. I used to avoid the area because that's where CNN's headquarters were, and I didn't want to have to bump into Zucker and challenge him to a breakdancing battle. That would have been good Instagram content. But now it's Christopher Columbus statue there has to be guarded by the police because they know it's going to be defaced. It's going to be defaced because the left has decided that the history of this country is really a history of exploitation, rape, genocide, imperialism, murder, theft, and exploitation. And what's interesting is that, depending upon how they're going to set up their parameters for how they would judge any country, you could say that about any great civilization. There's always violence. There's always wars. There's always, internecine struggle. There's always all of these things. But is that the majority? Is that what most of the history really was? Or did it create a society where people overwhelmingly lived in peace, prosperity, and some degree of happiness? America is the greatest nation state that has ever been, the greatest force for good in the world, and it's only possible because of people who are willing to take risks and willing to be leaders. Christopher Columbus certainly played a large role in all of that, and Columbus is somebody who I think we are right to honor for the accomplishment, and that is it, for the discovery. No one is saying that everything he did was great or that he was a perfect or wonderful man. We're just saying this guy made it. It's like he won a big race, and we are giving him the trophy for the race, and that's it. I think this is a perfect time to tell you all that we already have the next Shields High episode done, and I've been talking to producer Mark, we're going to create a series of them, so I have a bunch to release in succession on a predetermined schedule at once. But that's for those of you who are listening to the radio show right now on a radio, one of our wonderful affiliates across the country. This is another reason why we really need you to subscribe to the podcast of the Buck Sexton Show, because this is not going to air on the terrestrial station. It's only going to be a podcast extra. Already have one done, the first Siege of Malta. There's going to be 2 Siege of Malta podcasts. I think there's going to be 2 Lepanto podcasts, which will be different from the one I did years ago for a whole bunch of reasons. And I'm also considering, just as a little special gift to producer Mark, doing a Dracula history podcast to release this year on Halloween. I'm thinking about it. So that one I might not have time to get to, but the other ones are already happening. So just please do subscribe to the Buck Sexton Show, the iHeart app. You can also subscribe in the Apple Podcast Store or on Spotify, which is very easy. I know there are a bunch of libs who are trying to get rid of Joe Rogan or censor him or whatever, but they also paid him $100 million, so there's that. But Spotify is a very easy interface once you start using it. I was skeptical of it at first, and I've got to say I use it all the time now. So all you have to do is
not quite as great as the iHeartRadio app.
No, the iHeartRadio app is way better, obviously. But I'm just trying to give people options. And so we'll do that. That's the plan. But we already have one in the can. So producer Mark, and he's got it. Producer Mark, can you confirm receipts so everybody knows I'm not just blowing smoke?
I will give you this one. He did actually record a podcast.
There you go. The first Shields High, not the first one, the most recent Shields High is in the can. I'm going to have another one done, and we're thinking we're going to start releasing them in November, take it into December, and then people have some fun stuff to listen to over the holiday period. If they didn't get to it during the week, so we released them, you can listen to them all in succession, and that's the plan. And all this Columbus Day talk, too, has got me. I mean, I want you guys to understand, wait, why was Columbus trying to find the New World? We always hear he wanted to find the route to the spice markets and the riches of the Far East, of South Asia and China. But also they wanted to do an end run on the Muslims, on the Ottoman Empire. They wanted to get around them because they knew that with a stranglehold on trade, the Ottomans were so wealthy, so influential and powerful, especially once they took out the the Mamluks in Egypt, and then added the Barbary coast to their empire, that they needed to find a way around this, or else they would not be able to economically keep up, and the Ottoman conquest would continue and just take in all of Europe. So Columbus and his voyage in 1492 plays directly into that, and the period that I'm talking about with the Siege of Malta, and really part one is what leads up to the Siege of Malta in would you be basically the first half of the 16th century. I know we're nerding out a little bit here, but you're going to love it. The Buck Sexton Show. Subscribe to the podcast. Shields High episodes coming.